Hey everyone! Before we dive into this terrifying story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment on what you think about this chilling tale. Let's explore the darkest mysteries of the world together. If you love stories that send chills down your spine, you're in the right place. Now grab your popcorn, turn off the lights, and come with me. The cold corridors of the morgue were filled with a heavy atmosphere, where silence was broken only by the muffled sound of Edgar's footsteps. A seasoned pathologist who had dedicated more than 2 decades to the grim routine of examining lifeless bodies. However, that night, something was waiting for him, something that would forever change his perception of the world. It was a particularly cold and damp night, one of those when the fog enveloped the city, hiding secrets that only the fearless dared to uncover. Edgar was alone, as usual, working on some overdue reports. He always preferred the silence of the early morning hours to finish his work. The younger pathologists, more superstitious, avoided the morgue at night. Edgar, however, was used to the little oddities that occasionally happened there. Flickering lights, doors that closed on their own, the creak of metal cabinets. He considered it all part of the building's natural aging. Around 3 in the morning, a time known by many as the witching hour, Edgar heard a noise that seemed to come from the cold chamber where the bodies were stored. It wasn't a common sound, not a metal clank or the noise of rats that sometimes hid in the shadows. It was something more rhythmic, a sound of repeated scratching, as if someone was trying to get out from one of the refrigerated drawers. Edgar hesitated for a moment, a cold sweat running down his forehead. His logical, scientific mind fought against the chill that crept up his spine. Taking a deep breath, he headed to the cold chamber. As he opened the heavy door, the cold, dense air escaped, and the sound abruptly stopped. He turned on the lights, which flickered annoyingly before stabilizing. Everything seemed in order, all the drawers closed and locked. Still, something bothered him, the feeling that he wasn't alone there. Edgar walked to the last drawer, from which he swore the sound had originated. Slowly, he pulled the lever of the drawer, expecting to find just another lifeless body. However, upon opening it, he found something inexplicable. Mr. Martinez's body, a man who had died 2 days before in a car accident, was turned over. The corpse was face down, which was impossible because Edgar clearly remembered placing him on his back in the drawer. For a moment, Edgar froze, trying to process what his eyes were seeing. Maybe one of the pathologists had moved the body, but he knew he had been alone in that wing since the start of his shift. More disturbing, however, were the deep scratch marks inside the drawer, as if someone had desperately tried to get out. Breathing deeply to maintain his composure, Edgar closed the drawer, made a note of his observations, and returned to the report room. But the sounds returned. Now, they seemed more intense, more desperate. He heard muffled moans that grew louder. With sweat on his forehead and his heart racing, he knew he had to check again, even though his instincts told him to run away. Upon returning to the cold chamber, Edgar noticed that the lights flickered more frequently. He opened the drawer again, and this time, Mr. Martinez's body was in a completely different position, as if it had been moved by invisible forces. The expression on his face, which had once been calm and serene, now seemed twisted in a silent scream. Terrified, Edgar quickly shut the drawer. But before he could leave the chamber, the other drawers began to open and close violently on their own. He heard whispers, a growing murmur that seemed to come from all sides. The light bulbs burst one by one, plunging the place into total darkness. In the complete silence that followed, Edgar could hear his own rapid breathing. He felt a presence behind him, an extreme coldness that made his hair stand on end. Slowly, he turned around, and there, in the dimness of the cold chamber, he saw a nebulous figure, indistinct but clearly human. It stood motionless, but its eyes, black as night, gleamed with a malevolent intensity. Edgar tried to run, but it seemed something was holding him, as if the floor was gripping him. The figure slowly approached, and with each step, the air around Edgar became denser and colder, as if it were sucking all the life out of the room. Desperate, he closed his eyes, muttering prayers he hadn't said in decades. And then everything stopped. The cold, the presence, the sounds, everything vanished as if it had never happened. Edgar slowly opened his eyes and realized he was alone. The morgue was as before, silent and still. The drawers were all closed, and the cold chamber was in order. He wondered if it had been his imagination, the fatigue of years of work finally taking its toll. But as Edgar turned to leave the cold chamber, he saw a mark on the wall that hadn't been there before. Deep scratches, as if someone had desperately tried to leave a message, a plea for help from the other side. And next to the mark, in shaky, poorly formed letters, there was a word: please. Edgar left the morgue that night, unable to continue. He never returned to work in a cold chamber again and spent the rest of his days in silence, haunted by the memories of that night. But those who replaced him in the morgue began to notice strange things: scratches on the walls, whispers in the darkness, and a feeling that alongside the dead, something else still roams there. So, what do you think happened that night? Was it just the fertile imagination of a tired man? Or is something much darker lurking among the dead? Leave your comment below with your theory, and don't forget to subscribe for more terrifying stories like this one. See you next time. If you can sleep until then,